Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. You guys know her. You love her. You're obsessed with her. You love when we come together. One of my all-time favorite humans, not only on the planet, but, in all of the different dimensions and different, planets we've played on together before and lifetimes that we've lived together and things and paths that we've crossed. She's one of my favorite all-time humans ever. Like, let's just be real. One of my favorite souls to connect with, Miss Pilar Lesko. Pilar, welcome freaking back to the pod. I'm so happy you're back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Good. Oh my gosh. Okay. So everyone, I had to have Pilar back on because not only is she a regular guest here because you love her, you love when we come together, like I mentioned, but we were having a really friggin' juicy conversation in the height of such unprecedented, chaotic, uncertain, kind of a hot mess times here in 2020. We had a couple hours of a conversation, just us two riffing, last week. And we were like, this is so good, so powerful, so pivotal. We need to bring this to the podcast and see what comes through and what we can share with all of you. And so I don't even know where today is going to go. Typically before a podcast, I'll have kind of a major focus, but when it comes to Pilar and I'm just like, let's just come together and see whatever wants to come through us and let us be the vessels of it. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So we were talking about, when we met last week, we were chatting kind of about this idea of like multiple dimensions at play, multiple timelines at play. Like, things feel really, for a lot of people, anxious, overwhelming, scary, like the world is crumbling around them and like everything is falling apart. And how can we possibly have hope and faith right now? How are you okay? Let's just kind of start there of where we want to go and what you're feeling called to focus on, and that in terms of your assignment and what's coming through you. What is your kind of focus for people who are feeling all of that right now, feeling so hooked into the matrix of this very 3D consciousness of what's playing out? What's coming through for you that you're focusing on right now while we navigate this?
Good question.
D, all of the above.
So I'll start with what I'm up to, and then I'll speak to what I would offer to someone who's feeling really hooked in. So I've never actually said this like publicly or out loud, except to my partner. I am 100% working in timeline collapsing and construction right now.
Ooh.
Like collapsing old ones and constructing new ones. I kind of switch off. Or I guess I do both at once. So I am still called to go in and track dying, expiring timelines for the purpose of helping people get off of them. My main focus is tapping into what's coming online and what are the updates, what are we moving towards, what's available now, and once I'm clear on that, pulling it in, holding it, and making it available to anyone who wants it. So when I say making it available, I don't mean I'm going out and being like, we all have to do this now. I just mean I'll be like in the energy of it, or I'll be in the template that's available, and whoever wants it comes and gets it. Sometimes through modalities or through speech, and sometimes literally just from getting in my energy field. And more often than not, for that person, it's just permission to start operating with the like updates that they've already received that they weren't sure were like okay to use yet, or they weren't sure were like what's happening.
Right. Right. Well, but that's something that, I mean, I will say that I really admire about you is it isn't, here's my 10-step process program of how to get, into these new templates. It really is and yes, you have programs, and yes, you have offerings, and yes, you have ways people can work with you, but even more so, which I think is more important, which I think is where we're shifting into, and this is how it will go, but you're just ahead of the timeline, the embodiment of it. I will hold it. I will embody it. I will expand myself in it. I will be that guide, be that example, and people feel that, whether they work with you or not. If they tap onto your Instagram, they feel you. They're not seeing you because you're kind of MIA a little bit, which I kind of am personally really like obsessed with. But you're kind of, I just picture you like out in like a tent in a field, just like, you know, playing with the earth and talking to the wolves and like talking to the stars. But like, yet I can still feel you, and you never feel distant or unapproachable or like you don't care. It really is just like, oh, I can feel her in that. And then I'm like drawn to it and I'm able to access it within myself through your embodiment of it. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
It's, that's exactly it. That was perfectly described. And something I've started telling people, something I've started telling my one-on-one clients is us meeting is just to satisfy like you're human, that we're having a transaction. 100%. Like beyond that, of course, things will happen when we meet, of course, but that's becoming I'm seeing how that's just a placeholder that our human selves need to feel like we're doing something together, but everything's already being done between the fact that you're now in my field, I'm now in yours, we now have a container around us, you're now getting like a high level of access. If I get an update, it's now available to you. Like, and so obviously cool. This works differently with different people, but for example, like with some people, I have a client right now and all I have to do is bring something down and be like, this is it now. And the client messages me and asks like, is this it now? And I'm like, yes. Wow. Like yes. I don't even tell them what it is. They ask me like, is this what's going on?
That is so cool. Wow.
Yeah. So the timeline work is something I feel like I've been assigned to and have been doing for quite some time, but it wasn't until recently a good friend of mine created this awesome system. And it's this system where it's figuring out what the archetype of your starseed origin is. It's a whole thing. But when she showed it to me and I took the test, and the thing I got basically laid out for me what I know I do, but what I've always acted like isn't happening, or what I've always sort of diluted and watered down to try to make more sense or seem more digestible. Yeah. So since I saw that, I've been like, okay, I know I'm doing this now. Like I would 100% know I'm doing this, and it's given me a lot more permission to do timeline work and be like, that's old. Like I'm collapsing that and I'm moving over here, and here's what's coming in over here, and people are welcome to come with me. But I don't need people to understand what I'm doing or understand me or get what's going on with
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. You're just, I mean, and that's the thing, you're like so immersed in it and you find such peace there, which I think is really challenging for people right now. There's so much happening where I see like our clairsentient channels of sorts, almost like these antennas that kind of turn out and they start to scan of like, okay, how should I feel? What should I be thinking? What should I be downloading? Where we really need to be turning them back in so that it's attuning to ourselves and our own information in our own channels. But what's happening is people are seeking out and trying to get this like external, like someone just tell me it's going to be okay. Someone give me what's going on. I need to know. And it creates this false sense of safety. It's all an illusion. We think that we're controlling things, kind of like we were talking about with even people doing this astrologically of like, well, here's what's going to happen based on the stars. Well, cool. I do enjoy astrology. Do not get me wrong. And also fate and multiple timelines and multiple things are at play. We have free will. Like it's not as simple as saying, here's what's going to happen because of this. Like what's happening right now is not a science problem. It's not a math problem. Like it is an art, quite honestly. It is an unfolding. It is mystical. There is magic. There is mystery here. And there's so much happening at play that even people who are like, this is what's going to happen. I'm like, in this moment, sure, if everything just keeps going perfectly linear like this, but there's so much being added to this that does anyone actually know? So I think it's really important right now for people to be tuning into their own information. Yes, being aware of what's going on to a certain extent, but also recognizing like you have power, you have information, you have your knowingness, and you have to tune into that at the end of the day. And that's how I find peace, is I tune into myself and I tune everything else out and clear that energy out. But for you, would you say that that's what is really important to you, even for those people who are feeling anxious and overwhelmed right now? Like how do they start to tap into their own gifts within these timelines and this information and this knowingness?
Yes. Okay. So I'll say what I do and then I'll speak to them. Um, I don't tune into pretty much anyone. I have a couple people, and if I'm going to tune into them, what they're bringing through needs to feel fresh to me. I do not tune into things I've graduated from or feel expired. That's like off the table for me. Sometimes I'll tune into other channels once I've brought something through to see if we're all getting the same stream. But honestly, if I were to show you all the things I watch, you would laugh. Like it's not, I don't listen to astrologers, to anyone doing predictions, to energy reports, specifically because I track energy. I don't want to distort or dilute what I'm bringing through by tracking so many other people.
Ooh, I love
so if
that.
I do it, I'm going to do it at a specific time for a specific reason. And I also know that's very unique to me. I know some people who actually, they open their channel by tapping into other channels. So it's not black and white. But I know for me, less is more. And if I'm meant to get a message from someone, it's very clear. It's not like what should I put on in the background because I'm bored? Like it's very clear. I need to go listen to this because there's a message for me. So that's what I do for people. And this has morphed with me, but I've pretty much since my inception been a turn down all the other noise kind of person. Because like you, I'm super open. It's very easy to get lost in the sea of what everyone else is bringing through. And so much of what's being brought through, and I this is just like straight up, so much of what's being brought through right now is laced in distortion. There's a lot of there's a lot of channels that are just, let's say, clogged or very stuck in like artificial timelines and bringing through information that is not helpful for where we're going. And it could be helpful for someone who finds them at that time, but that's my perception.
Which I feel like we talked about last time was like the distortion, the manipulation, the hijacking of energy. Because we talked about this in our like New Age Christianity conversation. And even like those who are compromised, which maybe we can just touch on it really quickly because, and here's the thing, like this is our perspective, what we're seeing, what we're getting, suck out the juice, spit out the pits. I'm not trying to be like, this is the only way. Like I am, the way, the truth, and the life. Like I'm not saying that, but I do want to speak candidly to those of us, because what I get a lot too is like I'll have clients or I'll have people I'm speaking with who feel it, but they're afraid to say it. Kind of like we were talking about the piece around I don't want to seem like I'm better than, or I'm more woke or anything like that. We have this like judgment of, we're all sitting kumbaya style. And yes, there's unity. And yes, I don't believe in division. However, there is real shit of like, you need to be able to honor when something feels fucking off to you. And there are times where I will listen to something and I am like, how is that person saying that? Like that's so not like, there's so much that I could, put against that. Like, it's just not real. Now those people think the same thing about me, I'm sure. So, and that's the hard part is like, who's technically right and who's wrong. It's not about making it so black and white, but how do you navigate this idea of like, okay, I only tune into what's fresh versus, okay, this is distorted, this is compromised, there's something here, and trusting that, cultivating deeper levels of self-trust there.
So what we're speaking to right now is like the accordion of levels of consciousness, because it's not, oh, this person is more right. It's just there's more resonance with this messenger because of the level of consciousness I operate from. And this is where I very much agree with you that yes, there's the law of one, and that is an operating law in this universe. And there is a return to unity consciousness while still remaining embodied as eyes and as humans. However, in this play, and I started saying this publicly like within the last year because I just got so sick of not saying it. There are levels. There are 100% levels. And the example I always give is if I were to go play soccer and I'm playing with someone who's been playing soccer for 20 years, I'm not going to be anywhere close to their level on the soccer field. Like not even remotely close. So someone who has been, oh gosh, I don't even know how to word this because there's no way to really like put it out of like how you get there because there's so many different paths. But the way I'll put this is that we all have different aspects of consciousness or of the human experience that we are both beginners at and others that we are masterful at. Yeah. So I have no issue at this point saying like, yeah, that this is the level of consciousness I'm at, and I'm not going back to kindergarten, first grade, second grade metaphysics to play and hang out with you. Like, because that's not where I am anymore. I love that you're there and I respect your journey 100%, but I'm not going to leave my level to help you feel better about me or to have me make more sense to you.
Right.
Or to have, let's say if like the person is wanting you to change, because it will help them feel better. Like I'm not gonna leave that level. So once I've always felt this way, always felt the levels, because you can feel like, okay, I am up leveling from this. I am graduating out of this. This is where my consciousness is now. We all have those experiences. And to act like we're all vibrating at the same level of consciousness and frequency is absolutely absurd, because you can see right now how that's not true.
Right.
And for me, the cultivation of the ego and the I, and of acknowledging this is where I am, was very important for me in anchoring into who I actually am and the level of consciousness I actually carry. Because the whole, like, we're all the same, the kumbaya circle, like that was actually a distortion for my consciousness. Like that was keeping me in places I didn't need to be anymore. So there's that piece. And then what I'll say about when you're deciding who you want to tune into or what to tune into, the first thing I always tell people is it's important that we understand where those decisions or those draws are originating from. Because if you're hooked in to listening to this person because you feel like if you don't, you're not woke, that's not an organic draw. That's a hook based on a false identity. Or if you feel like if you don't tune into this, you're not going to be relatable because you won't be experiencing suffering anymore, also a hook, not an organic draw. So what I would tell people to make it like really basic is when you go to interact with something, rather than just going to do it, take a moment and be like, where is this coming from? And something that's coming from charge is going to feel drastically different than something that's coming from your pure, like very neutral expression of this feels good right now.
Beautifully said. And what I want to highlight there is, yeah, it's when it comes to energy, there's a feeling there. So this is something, it's not mentally, logically on paper going to make sense. And it's challenging because there are like certain leaders and certain people that I have friends or clients that are obsessed with. And I'm like, the instant I get in that energy, I'm like, oh, my whole body like reacts. There's a feeling, there's a body sensation and reaction to that person's energy. Does that make them wrong or bad? No, I don't have a judgment there. It's instead like, oof, that what we're vibrating at, whatever fucking level, what, I don't even care at that point. It's just like, this is like so mismatched that I can't even, it would be me abandoning and betraying myself and my body's wisdom to forego what I'm feeling and not trust that, and instead listen to them or take in what they're sharing because everyone else is. So it really comes down to, like knowing your body, knowing your cues, knowing your energy, and trusting that, and being okay with standing alone. Because there are people that don't understand, that are in my life, that are like, how could you not? Like, oh my God, da, da, da. And I'm like, I don't know, something in my whole body, like it's like I get this like nauseous, like almost like I'm going to throw up feeling in certain people's energy. And I'm like, and I used to judge that about myself of, oh, there's something wrong with me. There's a mirror here. There's, it's all of this, because that's what the spiritual world, in air quotes, teaches. But instead it was like, no, like we're simply just not resonating energetically. Versus if I tune into someone, like I was listening to something this morning and I felt expansive. I felt like this peace wash over me. I felt like, oh my God, that's so interesting. I did an energy healing yesterday and that was the exact message that came through for me, and she's affirming it. I was like, that's really interesting. Okay, we're attuned to similar channels, we're getting similar information, and that feels resonant with me. So I think there's this, self-trust piece, there's knowing your body, knowing your energy, and then there's the piece of like allowing that, like it gets to be that simple. Stop going mental and mind to try to like make sense of it. It's not going to make sense. Energy it's too immense to try to put on paper. Trust it and play with that. What happens if I trust this? Yeah. Oh my gosh. This whole like distortion versus fresh compromise thing is so good. Can you expand on, Pilar, what you were saying about the integration of like your ego in this, like in this piece?
Yeah. So this is fun.
So yeah, I told you I didn't know where we were going to go today.
Yeah. So how you work with this, of course, is going to be really subjective to everyone, because we all have different things modeled for us, and different things modeled as good, and different things modeled as bad. So we come into adulthood, whatever, with varying relationships to the I and the all. I was someone who had zero issue with compassion, feeling connected to everyone, humbleness, playing small, because the unhealthy humbleness, all of it. So my program was like unhealthy humbleness. You're not, and I don't want to say better because it's not about better, but your I doesn't deserve to take up space.
Yeah.
So of course, through my like very long spiritual journey and varying spiritual communities, that only got more and more reinforced of we're all onesie, and like there's no levels, there's no hierarchy. And I remember being a teenager and feeling how off that was, but because of my own programming, it was really difficult to figure out how to operate within it, because it was difficult for me to feel like I could take up space, or my I had my I could individuate in a way, or my ego could individuate. So obviously this is a long time ago, but something that's happened over, let's say, the last like 5 years, and this is a process. So when I started working with a teacher of mine who was really instrumental on my path, one of the first things she said to me was, you're going to start looking in the mirror every day and saying to yourself, I am highly advanced. He was like, the level of your consciousness does not match how you act, how you talk about yourself, and it's actually distorting how you relate to people. Like it's distorting your whole reality, that you're not willing to see that. Because you're so deep in, I need to be humble and I need to be small and we're all the same.
Right.
So for me, the cultivation of my ego was super important. And in spiritual communities, the New Age timeline, the Christian timelines, all of it, it's like, no ego. Ego is bad. Kill the ego. That's not my opinion. I think the ego is good. I think it needs to be purified for some people. I think for others, it needs to be cultivated. And when you go through that process, like at this point, I don't even relate to it as ego. It's just, it's embedded in me to know who I am, to be confident in that, and to have no issue saying, this is who I be. So it becomes, you don't relate to it in this like dualistic way at a certain point where you're like, oh, here's my ego and here's my heart. I look at my ego as being on the same team as my heart. Like my ego is constantly working with my heart and saying like, how does this feel? Are we good with this? But for me, when I was going through that process and when I was able to start doing that, I saw all of the holes I had created in my energy field through my old programming of not being willing to stand in who I am and who I know I be, and all of the places in which that had been very detrimental to my energy, be it through relationships, exchanges, things I would allow to happen in my business, just in general, energy I was allowing to come into my field that did not need to be there. And this is the best part of this story. So prior to all of this, and this is so fun to me, I used to see, there were certain people in my field who I would perceive, I saw them as egotistical. When I went through this, and it was like, because I had my own imprints and distortion around ego, confidence, and power, because I see all of those as like deeply related.
Totally.
When I went through this process, my clouded glasses came off, and I'm looking at those same people and I'm like, you are not egotistical. Damn. You are actually very confident. And because of the consciousness level I was operating from before, I could not see that because I was hooked and triggered by my own wounding and imprints. And this is, of course, this is what's happening worldwide right now.
Right.
What I'm seeing is not a clear perception of what you actually are. I'm stuck in something that has much more to do with me. So when I look back at those people, and this has just been happening ever since, as I like grow in my sovereignty and come more into my heart through that, I look at people and I'm like confident, like grounded power, like not rude, just a very high level way of running your energy field. Whereas years ago, I would have been like, that person's mean, like that person's this. And so what's so cool to me about the levels of the game is you don't actually know what you're seeing. Like until that piece that you're perceiving is worked out within you, you don't know what you're looking at. And now I know I have people who look at me, I get it sometimes, they think about me what I used to think about those same people who I thought were egotistical.
Oh my God, it's so true. Damn, that's so beautifully said. Do you think it has anything to do with what I have found with those people too, is typically, and this isn't like across the board, but I would say like a good majority of the time, those are their defined centers that trigger the fuck out of my open centers. I've had this with a specific mentor. She's so defined. She knows who the hell she is. She doesn't put up with anything that, and I used to be so deeply triggered by that of like, oh my God, she's so obsessed with herself and da, da, da. And then I was like, wait a second. It was interesting because now I can see it as like an invitation into like, that's something that I deeply desire, is to be able to embody that at the level that she does. But I didn't have the capacity to hold that yet. So I was deeply triggered and turned off of like, oh my God, I want to throw up. I'm like, oh, ew. And now I'm like, oh, interesting.
I could totally see for sure how the centers play into it, how probably astrological things play into it. Like all the systems for sure probably have their overlay.
But it's also so much more immense than that.
Yeah. I also think, and this is why talking about this is so edgy, because the program running in the spiritual world, even just saying that sounds so funny, like the program running in the, let's just say like spiritual timelines or like new age timelines would be where it's like really pervasive, is ego is bad. And here's all, and this is true. Here's all the examples that we see in the hologram of unhealthy ego. We don't have examples in the hologram or pervasive examples of healthy ego. So it's just turned into this like, okay, so let's just destroy it, or let's just like push it to the side, because we've just all been bombarded since we were young with images of people who do have very quote unhealthy egos. So the cultivation of it, it's also very important for men. That's another piece. The cultivation of the ego is very important for the masculine. But when we're willing to see, it's when you're able to stand in who you are, and it's not just who you are as an I in this lifetime, it's who you are beyond knowing. It's who you are in the vastness of everything you've been and everything you will be, and all aspects of you. Like when you can start touching into that and coming into that, to me, there's no other choice like than to just, oh God, what's the word? Like take up space and open your energy field and be someone who like carries a lot of light and a lot of energy, because you're in touch with the truth of who you are. And this is possible for everyone. We're all supposed to be little suns. Like we're all supposed to be these like beaming suns.
Right.
So when I see that program running, the concern for me is, and I see this a lot in my client work, is there actually people whose missions are being delayed and whose energy fields are compromised because of the humble program. Because there's an unwillingness to stand in who they are. And because they're not willing to do that, a lot is getting in that should not be there.
Wow. Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that for sure. Dang. Okay. So where can we go from here? So oh my God, I'm like, everyone just take a deep breath and like, let that sink in. Damn, you were just called up. In terms of the roles that we all play, what I mean by this is when I think of like truth seeking, truth telling, activism, advocacy, like, sharing things, and this idea that like, truth is subjective, because like really what is the truth? Who has the full permission and hierarchy and kind of authority to decide this is the ultimate truth, versus like, this is just the information that's resonating with me. I don't know if it's the truth for everyone. How do you separate standing so firmly in your truth and your information and what's coming through for you, holding space for differing perspectives, but also like, do you see what I'm saying? Like in terms of even like sharing, sometimes speaking our truth online, it can feel like then it becomes divisive of like, I'm not trying to say that I'm right and you're wrong. But at the same time, like there's also fact and there's also evidence and there's also things that it's like really and truly sometimes hard to like allow a differing of opinion. Cause it's like, dude, like it's so obvious, to me sometimes. This is kind of a long-winded question, but how do you, if we don't have, because sometimes I would look at it in terms of like, is this my ego or is this my heart, right? Is this like, am I grounded? Am I sovereign? Am I in my heart center? Or am I triggered in my ego and I want to be right and I want to prove something and like kind of coming from that energy? Well, if the ego and the heart work together and they're integrated and you've cultivated that, how do you determine that?
Okay, so the question is, how do I, is it how do you bring through something that's true to you, but still hold space for all the differing opinions?
Yeah. Without, because yes, there's different levels of consciousness. And there's a sense of this, because this came up in one of my programs once. We were having this conversation around truth, because yes, truth is subjective. And yes, again, who has the ultimate authority to decide what's the ultimate truth? But, and also there are things that are fact. There are things that are like, there's specific things that it's like, how is that not the ultimate truth or the objective truth? And leaving space for nuance and leaving space for different layers and leaving space for different timelines, and also honoring the timeline that we're in of what the truth is in this moment here and now. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Something I hear you, or I'm hearing when you're speaking that you're leaning towards is critical thinking, and how that has we don't see a lot of that in certain spaces. We see purely just, this is what I feel. This is so okay. My partner and I were breaking this down last night.
And it's like there's a lot of people operating from emotions, from trauma, from the versus here's the critical thinking, here's what actually makes sense, and here's my own information coming through.
So, okay, what we're getting towards, and Chris and I were talking about this last night, is in order to critically think or to have okay, let me back up. What you're feeling about something, feelings aren't bad. We love feelings. Totally. But at this point in the game, and this has been true my whole journey, what you're feeling about something, there's a very high chance, and it depends on who you are, but oftentimes I feel this, depending on where you're at in your journey, that needs to be looked at, because what you're feeling could actually just be, like you said, from a trigger, from a wound, from a hook into a false identity, from a hook into, oh gosh, I mean, false identity pretty much covered all of it. So
well, it reminds me of what you were talking about now that you're saying this, of the like distortion and compromised. Yeah. And we have to honor that that's where that person is versus I'm here to convince them that they're wrong.
Oh yeah. When somebody is charged up and feeling something and then relating to that feeling as the truth, for me personally, I'm like, okay, that's where you are and got it. I don't need to, there is nothing here for me. There's nothing here for me because I can see what's going on. When I say there's nothing here for me, I mean, I don't need to convince you. I don't need to give you my energy. This is what we're seeing on like the global scale right now, is a collective dark night of the soul because of everyone's very immature emotional intelligence. Because we're at this point where the emotions have been put on this pedestal of, if somebody says they feel a certain way, everyone else just has to accept that and can't question the truth of what's going on, or can't bring critical thought into the conversation. Right. So, but the key piece here is, it's not that we do away with feelings. It's that we clear out ourselves to the point where we actually can get in touch with what we actually feel and what we are actually perceiving. So like, for example, I think I've spoken to you about this before. You can get to this point, you can get into that divine neutrality place where you're not bypassing, you're not tapped out, you're a clear channel. So if something comes into your field that you know is, quote, wrong, right, you can trust that because you're aware this isn't hooking into anything that has to do with me. I can just see that this is wrong. Like, this is not good for humanity. What I'm seeing on the hologram right now, that's totally different than I'm upset because this happened to me in my childhood 6 times. And now I'm having all of my repressed emotions come up that I haven't processed. And now I'm taking those and funneling them into whatever I'm upset about. And I have no space for dialogue or for understanding. So critical thinking is like, when you're charged up, you don't have access to critical thinking anymore. It's you can't access it because of what's going on in your brain and the limbic system. Yeah. So it's become we're at this like point in the game where, and this is what I was saying to you earlier, in a lot of situations, and it's, of course, this is again depending on where you're at, it's not actually about, oh, let me convince you about my opinion, or let's have this conversation so there can be understanding, because you're not going to walk into a therapy session when someone is releasing a huge emotion and be like, okay, now let me tell you about my opinion, and like they're not in the space to do that. Right. So what was the question? I knew there was another piece here.
No, this is really good, because what I'm picking up of what you're saying is so spot on with something I even was just talking about with on one of my group calls like a week or two ago, where are you trying to be? You're trying to like this proving energy, this I need to be right, I need them to understand, I need them to be on the same page as me, I need them to get it. It's this really like reactionary, like you're saying, charged energetic space of like, I need them to get it, versus, and that's a human experience. Trust me, you guys, I have these conversations. Thank God I have my husband here, because I will have these conversations where I'm like, what the fuck? Like, are they so dumb? Like, what is happening? You know, like, I have a human experience too, where I'm completely charged up and I get really freaking fiery, especially with politics. But I do it because of what I get. And I'm like, I don't understand how everyone can't be seeing this. I don't understand it. But I have to, in those moments, I have my systems and my processes to be with it, to move it, to, you know, really come back into that sovereign, grounded state of, I don't need you to get it, because I get it. And I embody it. And it's not something that I need to prove to anyone. And it's okay if you don't get it. Guess what? No sweat off my back. Like, that, it is what it is. Like, that's cool. That's where you're, like you're saying, that's where you're at. This is where I'm at. And I can unhook from it and detach from it. There are times where I might get hooked in, and the part that I play, and very consciously, is like, you want to go, let's go. Like, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I can take a bitch out. I really can. I'm not proud of it always, but there are times where I consciously am like, oh, you're playing this game. This is what you want to go into. Okay, two can play. But there are, most of the time, what's better for my energy and my nervous system and the baby that I'm growing inside of me is to say, like, I see the game you're trying to play. You're trying to hook me in right now. I literally do not have to play. And that, you can think that that means that you're right and whatever, and you can assume whatever you want. I know my truth. I know my heart. I know my intention. And I'm simply honoring my energy by being like, I am not, like you said, going to go to that level with you because I'm over here. And that's fine. I'll hold space over here. If you want to join me over here at some point, cool. Like, kind of, sometimes I'm almost seeing it as like, when you want to take, you know, rub the dust off your eyes, I'll be over here, and like, we could probably have a conversation at that point. But for like now, you do you. You do you. It has nothing to do with me unless I hook into it and make it have to do something with me.
We talked about this last time. This is like up right now. This is super big. Is the energy game playing, and there's so many of them. What you were talking about, the different false identities. I need to be right. I need you to see me as this. And there's so many, it gets very subtle, and there's so many ways it breaks down. But this is what I was speaking to earlier when I was saying that it's really important that now more than ever, we don't get trapped into thinking that conscious communication or dialogue is always going to be the correct thing to lean on because when somebody is playing an energy game, and you're able to step back and see that, it's exactly what you were saying. And like I was saying earlier, right now, getting hooked into that it's a fool's errand. It really depends. It's very situational, but I'm seeing this like across the board with everyone in my field and like in the collective. It's that person, more often than not, if we're talking about an energy game, that person is not looking to harmonize with you, or that person is not looking for resolve that feels good for the level of consciousness you're operating at. Very objectively, that person is looking for your energy, because their brain is addicted to the chemicals that release when they play energy games with people.
Yes. And they're looking for their next hit. You're their cocaine dealer.
Yep. And it's very possible right now to actually become just unavailable for that to even come in your field, because it's at such a high right now. And this is what I was speaking to earlier when I was saying, like, when you decide to hold your level of consciousness and where you're operating at in a really compassionate and kind way, and you work with it however you're guided to, which is going to be different each time. But let's say it's you just saying like, I'm not playing this game with you. When you do that, you're giving that person, if they want it, the option to meet you. Or you're saying, or you can stay there, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not meeting you there. And this,
and it's not even always a conversation. There are times where it's just a delete. There's times where it's a block. There's times where, and I've done that so much lately, and I don't have it happen as often anymore, because I think truly, like, embodiment wise, I've noticed I don't even have the space for it. Like, don't even come at me, that I energetically have that boundary. But if it does, like, there's one that creeped in a couple days ago, and I was like, I could go in on this, but I don't have to. I don't want to. It's not productive. So I just deleted it, and they can make that mean whatever they want. But to me, I'm like, we're not seeing the same thing. And I can honor that that's your process, but this is my process. So I'm going to do me over here.
And we live in like, in the 3D matrix, there is an extremely pervasive program of, I want your energy, and therefore that should be enough for you to give it to me. Amen. And this can manifest in like ways where it's, I'm in resonance with you, and therefore you should give me your energy. And it can also manifest as, I have dissonance with you, therefore you should still give me your energy.
Yeah. Oh, so beautifully said. So my thought then, kind of because the question at the beginning of this whole riff and like kind of tangent we went on, which was so good, was this idea that, like, in the past, it's like, okay, so ego versus heart. Is this an ego response or is this a heart response? Well, you were talking about, you put them together. Okay, if they're integrated, then how do I know? Is it ego heart or is it something else? I almost see this as, and maybe you would agree, maybe not, is it more, instead of ego, it's hook or identity or old programming versus, is this my heart space? Which would have ego, I know who I am, I know my conviction, I know my truth, integrated with that.
If your ego, so there, it depends on the health of the ego. So if your ego, like the false identity programs I talk about, usually stem from unhealthy ego. So it's, I need to be seen, I need you to see me as, or I need to be seen as woke, spiritual, right, pure, an activist, et cetera, like all the things, insert adjective here. That is you, that's the person that's the person needing an identity, a false identity, to be confirmed by their hologram or by the external reality in order to feel like they're okay, or in order to feel, and then we get into where did it come from? Is it to feel safe? Is it to feel like you belong? Is it to feel a sense of worth? Like, who knows? So that those hooks, I will oftentimes relate them to ego. I'm sure they could come from a number of places. When I describe like the health of the ego, one way I would break that down is, I know who I am in this moment. That's the ego. I know who I am. That's individual consciousness. And I don't care if you see me that way. I don't care if I'm received that way.
Beautiful.
I don't care if you perceive me in a different way than who I know I am. None of my energy is tied up in needing anyone to see me a certain way or needing to be a certain way to please other people. So when that is operating in that way, then the way I like would see it is like, when the ego is in service to the heart and working with the heart, then you're going to have no issues saying, this is who I be, and this is what's coming through for me. And I have the utmost compassion and respect for anyone who has dissonance or resonance. But that doesn't mean I'm going to play a game with you because you don't agree, or because you're like trying to play an energy game with me. That just means, it's like, the way I see it is, because anytime this is what's so funny to me, anytime we share a message, I don't buy that ego isn't involved, because your I is sharing a message that came through for you. We need our ego to be humans. It's like, the ego is what helps us be a human I. So yeah, I guess like the marriage or the merging of the two, or them just working together, it's funny. The thing that's popping into my head is Jesus. It's how like Yeshua was, all the like masters who incarnated. This is the message I'm bringing through. Yeah. You can follow me if you want. You can listen if you want. I'm not backing down. And if you don't like it, I still have love for you.
I love that. So it's almost like heart-based ego versus this is my human brain trying to like make sense of this. Heart-based ego versus like a hooked, distorted ego.
Yeah, I guess the way I relate to it is like when you have a healthy relationship to ego.
Healthy ego versus unhealthy.
Yeah, it's going to work with the heart in a very harmonious way. And you're not going to be stuck in the question of, am I being egotistical? Like, that's not going to come into your head, because you're going to feel like, this is what my I wants to express in this moment for me and for the collective. And my heart was already on board with that. But having your ego on board, like the ego is the thing that sometimes I look at it as like, it protects life. Like, it's the thing that gives life and protects life in a lot of ways. So yeah. And the other thing I hear all the time that I used to run to, that I've like taken out of my operating system, is, I don't want to sound egotistical when I say this, but, and then says something that, to me, I hear that now and I'm like, that's off. You should be able, like, of course, again, it's based on the person, but I get a lot of overly humble people who walk through my door and they preface everything with, I don't want to sound egotistical. I don't want this to sound pompous. I don't want this to sound self-absorbed. And it's like, what's coming through isn't that. It's you being in the embodiment of who you are. You don't need to preface it with, I don't want to sound egotistical. Just fucking own it. Like,
I want to ask you something, and I guess we could delete this if you're not okay with this question, because I know we said nothing's really off limits, but this is what's coming through for me now, because again, we'll delete this if it's crossing a line. But I would be curious then, your thoughts on the current president of the United States as of November 6th, 2020, Donald J. Trump. Do you think he's egotistical? Because that's a lot of people's problems with him is he's a narcissist, he's power hungry, he's egotistical. I don't see him that way, but I'm curious what you see.
So when Donald Trump got elected in 2016, because I was still tracking energy. I was still tuning into things. Like, I was still who I am. Like, I mean, I'm very different now, but I was still tuning in, like, through the dimensions. I remember.
I can just picture people right now, sorry, listening to this being so, like, my hands are sweaty because people are so fucking triggered right now.
Okay, I remember. Okay, so let's say I'm going to look at this through, like a fourth dimensional lens of consciousness, because that's really what uproared then in a lot of communities. I remember tuning in and being like, oh, wow, like this soul just chose to play such an interesting and potent role for the collective if we so choose to take it. If we so choose to receive what we're being offered. And what I saw then was this man represents the repressed collective shadow of the United States. Like, he represents so much of what has been not only repressed, but what has very, very unhealthy expression. So we see very unhealthy power in the United States. And then we see a lot of repression of power because all we've seen in the hologram is unhealthy power. So power must be bad because we've only seen poor examples of it. Ego must be bad. Right. So like, people who identify as being awake are very naturally going to want to repress, and people who don't too, repress these aspects that we've seen unhealthy expressions of. So when he was elected, I was like, the amount of shadow integration that could take place during this presidency is through the roof. Like, the amount that could be integrated in the human collective is just absolutely insane. Do I think his ego, what is it? Do I think he's egotistical? Do you, the story that a lot of people have, the issue they have is he's mean and he's egotistical and he's a narcissist and he's, an abuse of power. And I was just curious if you agree. Those are pretty, I am much too into nuance and subtlety to do blanket statements like that. Totally. To say this person is all these things. I think that I have seen him show actually very healthy expressions of ego. Simultaneously, I've seen unhealthy expressions too. I would never say across the board, this person is all these things, because there is much too much like nuance to unpack there. I've seen it go both ways. And what's interesting to me is when someone in the collective sees that. Remember I was talking about earlier? I used to think all these people were egotistical, and then I worked on my imprints and where I had been taught to, where I'd been modeled certain things, and a lot of those people transformed right before my eyes. It's the same thing with anyone we're looking at who's a big player on the stage. What level of consciousness are we perceiving them from? Like, are you perceiving that through one of your own imprints, or are you perceiving that through a really clear place? I also, this is like, I've never said this publicly. I think he's fucking hilarious. Like, I
do too. I find him, I don't find him mean. I find him very entertaining personally.
I think he is just, it's funny. Like, there's a lot of things he does too. And you can just see, I mean, all of politics is like this. It's like we're watching fourth graders, like the way they interact with each other. It's like watching fourth graders. Right. So of course he's flawed. They all are. But
we all are.
Yeah. The uproar. I remember in 2016 observing the uproar. And that was when like the energy harvesting matrices really like took it up to a whole new level. And I remember just thinking like with anything, a lot of this has very pure intent. And a lot of this is coming from a clear place. And because consciousness is paying so much attention to it, there is such a high level of hijacking happening and distortion and interference and infiltration. But when you're charged up, you don't know that's happening. You're just charged up and funneling your imaginative energy, your lower chakra energy into the thing that you think is right.
Yeah. Well, and it's that confirmation bias. Like, you're going to find it. You're attracting it of like you. And that's the thing about the unhealthy ego wants to be right. Like you just, and that's like how our human mind works. Like if we're in that space, we all have that. We all have moments of that. If I just want to be, I need to prove that I'm right. So you will naturally seek out information that will prove to you that you're right, even if it's not serving your highest good. We all naturally do that at times if we're unconscious, if we're tuned out. That's why being embodied and being present is so important. So you can be like, oh shit, like I'm doing that thing. Like what's actually coming through for me? And I agree, like with so much of what you said about him. I actually really appreciate that he is a fucking bulldog and he will go to bat and he will not take anybody's shit and he is willing to say it how it is, even though it's not popular. I think and this is my personal opinion, but we've tried politicians and air quotes of like this very like, I'm, people friendly and I'm super nice and I can say all the right things and it all sounds really cool. But again, when you tune into the energy of it, there's more there that meets the eye. So this is where, again, I think it's so important, kind of even circling us back from that little like tangent, the little like detour of you need to be in your own energy, be in your own channels, be in your own information and your own knowingness beyond what other woke leaders are saying, beyond what Instagram is saying, beyond what the media is saying, beyond what Pilar and I are saying. You have to sit with everything and what is in resonance and what is coming through for you. And are you willing for it to be unpopular? Or are you just trying to be like, I want to be seen as right, or I want to be, part of the cool club over here? And it's really being able to like turn all of that off and be like, okay, what am I feeling? What am I experiencing? And again, that's how I come back to hope and to faith and to feeling grounded in such uncertainty and creating safety in myself of like, even though I don't know what the fuck is going to happen externally, I'm okay. I've got me, because I can see beyond what's just like right here in this physical, because this is just one dimension of so freaking many.
Yeah. To the only thing I can like really respond to that feels important is like, if your assignment is in the political timeline or the like 3D, any of the 3D matrix timelines, the activism timelines, etc., you need to go in there sovereign as fuck, like sovereign as hell, or you're not going to be able to dismantle anything because you're still participating in it in some way.
Amen.
And that's where veils start to get removed, and that's where it can get uncomfortable for people. And that's why like I'm really clear about like, if my job is to remove veils, like if that's something I'm doing with someone, I need to feel like full permission from their higher levels that that's a go, because the removing of veils for people and the seeing what's going on behind it can be such an intense experience, and can leave you in that place. And I've been there bajillions of times, like since when I like got into conspiracy theories when I was like 14, 15, it leaves you with that feeling of like, what's really going on?
Yeah.
But
such a good point.
The piece here too that's like really important is that I feel is important for me to say is the amount, and I know for so many people, they hear me say this and they're like, you are a foof, but the amount of support we have from the higher realms, the amount of connection that's available to God through the self right now, like the amount of like peace and joy and love and just the support we're getting is through the roof. Like I keep telling people, like that connection to God is so open right now. Like it's so open, and that connection to your higher levels and that connection to like, I just want to feel, love or peace or joy or support. It's just so through the roof right now, because we can see so is the distortion and the infiltration and the darkness. Like they're both like on tap right now.
Yeah. God, that's so good. I even said that yesterday in a live I did. That's what I get too. Like one of the aspects of why what's happening right now is happening is because you're being initiated deeper into that relationship with the divine, with God, with something that's so much greater than us. Like, what if this is an opportunity to deepen your faith in whatever that aspect means for you, to have deeper levels of trust with, I'm okay no matter what's happening externally. Because until now, we all thought we were in fucking control. Oh, I go to work, I do this, like, like just literally blind, numb, kind of just coasting through life for most of us. And then 2020 happened and we're like, holy shit. And you're like waking up to things, you know, deeper conspiracy theories and the darkness and the pieces, and more dimensions are revealing themselves and more of us are waking up. And it's like, holy shit. And I have like chills of like, I don't control actually much of anything. Holy crap. That's scary. Triggers our own trauma response, triggers our own survival of, oh my God, I'm going to die. Like, what the hell? And then it's like, okay, but now we're being asked and invited into, will you create safety in yourself, even in the unknown, even in the uncertainty? Will you rely on and tap into God within you, God outside of you, God energy, like, you know, universal source here? Will you lean into support? Will you ride the waves that we're riding and like know that, again, no matter who even becomes president or no matter whatever, we're okay. Like it's happening how it was all supposed to, and we can trust that and we can surrender to that. And then what is my assignment in this? If we choose to believe our souls came here for a purpose and to play a part in this, well, then what is my information coming through of how I'm supposed to show up in this? Or am I going to get hooked into and spin out and lost in the sauce of everything is so dark and evil and distorted and people suck and division and, you know, anxiousness, and be there? Because you can play, you get to choose every day what your reality is. You get to choose what part you're playing. You get to choose what timeline you're buying into. So what does that look like? And will you take responsibility for that? Or will you be like, oh, woe is me, life is over. Oh, and like, that's it. Because you can do that. There's a lot of people that are. And I honor that. That's where you're at. Cool. But like, I personally don't want to play that game. So I'm not going to.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt some very, very like subtle feelings of, probably like 4 or 5 months ago, some feelings of like, wow, is this okay? And that's something I actually started speaking to and like have really anchored in now. But for me, since February, March, I've never felt more connected, more myself, more alive, more in tune. And I can feel when I like hold that, the amount of people that are so deeply, deeply triggered by it and have so many false projections that want to come out. But for me, this experience has been, oh, we're actually heading towards more of what's real now. Like we're actually on a journey that's more towards what's real and organic than we were before. And the way I've been living is that who I am is more supported by this reality than the prior reality. So that it's just been, and of course, like I was saying, that was hard for me to say at first because I was like, and I started speaking to in my emails how it's time that we start really holding space for our multidimensionality and nuance as humans, because I can be in my peace and I can still have sadness come up and
100%.
And that doesn't take away from my peace. And you as a person, and this is the message I kept getting, if you are leaving your peace or your joy or just your homeostasis or your love to try to be more relatable or to try to appease how you feel like others want you to be feeling, and it has nothing to do with like I'm actually suffering, it's just I should be suffering because that makes me relatable, that is like expiring. I got the message over and over and over again, like, you need to hold this level of peace. And I kept hearing like, you have worked so hard for this, and you want to like throw it to the side because there's a part of you that feels guilty for the frequency you're at. And I, of course, can completely speak with and hold space for and still have dialogue with people who aren't feeling that. But I saw really quickly, for me to pretend like I'm not here is very detrimental for myself and for anyone who wants to come into my field.
Well, it goes back to exactly what you're saying. Like, it's like going back down a level of like, oh, let me like, instead of humbling myself to like meet you where you're at, it's like, instead let me go ahead and feel sad with you so I can have empathy, versus I see that you're deep in grief. Like, I honor, I get you're afraid right now. Trust me. Like, I have slivers and moments where I'm like, oop, I'm hooked in, and I start to spin out, and I have to call myself back of like, whoa, 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 whoa. But I can hold peace and be an embodiment of that and hold that container, and they feel that from you. It doesn't serve anyone to like go down into, anger and, sadness and whatever in order to like make you feel seen. That just makes us both kind of miserable, versus like, I can witness you and I can hold space for you, but I'm also going to hold my peace over here. It's being able to hold the both, and which takes time to master. It's a skill set that you have to cultivate over time. But 100%, I think that it's not about spiritual bypassing. It's not about not having a human experience. It's not about, I just feel so fucking good all the time, and like, yay, God, it's not like we're eating, lollipops throughout the day, just like skipping with pigtails in our hair. Like, there's real shit, but it's knowing how to hold yourself in it, to move it, to be with it, to, all of these things, and being able to come back to this piece around, I feel peace, I'm okay, I have a relationship with God, whatever that might be. I can come back to that. That is my kind of divine neutrality, my energetic zero. This is where, versus my old energetic zero used to be anxiety, but it wasn't actually energetic zero, but that to me felt normal, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that the piece you said around, it's not spiritual bypassing, that's where we see like the nuance in this, because to a certain level of consciousness, it is going to look like toxic positivity and spiritual bypassing. And that's how it's going to be perceived. And something I'll tell people is, when chaos and suffering have been normalized in your reality, seeing someone in their peace is going to be very triggering.
So true.
That's where it's like, again, I can see how you're perceiving where I'm operating as spiritually bypassing because of that level of consciousness and that reality. But it's also important that I make it known that this felt important for me, that it's time to start widening what's possible for humans and unifying polarities and unifying paradox, and being able to see like, oh, like, it's possible that this person is in their peace because of X, and they're still having the human experience, but there's such a different energetic tone to that than bypassing. Like, it's we can't put it to words, but we all know a person who is grounded in their peace and is still welcoming whatever needs to come, versus someone in toxic positivity are 100%. Two completely different frequencies.
And again, it's something that other people might not understand. And like you're saying, they're going to be triggered by it, but you know your truth. your level of consciousness of where you're at. And that's such a good freaking point of like, it might look like toxic positivity to you.
Oh yeah.
It might look like spiritual bypassing, but girlfriend, I do my work, you know, like you can think whatever you want. That's fine. You can assume that. You can have your own things. I know where I'm at. And like, no one gets to tell me that that's not real for me. Like I had a mentor that would try to tell me like, oh, this and oh, that. And I was like, no, like you're not in my body. You don't get to tell me who I am and what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. You just don't. Like, I know me. Bottom line. That's it. Like there's no room for like interjection there of like, well, I didn't think no, that could be what you're seeing through your level of consciousness. Fine. But I know me and like, that's it. And you know you.
I have so much, like, I guess it would be sympathy at this point. I could call it empathy for the people who do feel like that.
Yeah.
Personal example is like my emails that I write. I pretty much just sort of tune into my higher levels and do energy reports. And the way that my higher levels speak through me is the exact type of frequency and languaging I used to make fun of when I was a teenager. Like,
really?
Like, I read my emails now and I'm like, you used to interact with stuff like this when you were a teenager and make fun of it because of how like airy fairy or da-da-da it felt to you at the time. And I read them and I'm like, oh, I get it. I was so in my pain body and my wounding at the time. There was no way for me to have the ability to perceive where that person was actually vibrating and what it took to get there and like the nuance of what was occurring. So I get it. Like I see my stuff now and I'm like,
Well, and here's the thing. Sometimes it's like you are wounded and you can't see because you're not on the same level of resonance. And other times there are people out there that are toxic positivity or that are spiritual bypassing and that it's not, that it is airy fairy. And like, that's where, again, you have to come back to what am I feeling here? And will I trust that versus trying to, again, logically make sense of it or trying to diagnose it. Like even people do this with the friggin' president. Oh, he's a narcissist and here's why. And here's that. Like, you don't know him like that through your perception. That's what you're seeing. But why are we trying to put labels and identities and like, we're trying to make people digestible, which is another thing we talked about when we talked last week of like, cause I even do this too of like, oh, am I digestible enough? Does it make sense enough? Is it juicy and hookish enough of like, you know, here's my, you know, perfect sign outside my door and here's who I am and here's what I do versus like, no, like I know who I am. I know the energy I'm embodying. I know my intention. And like you were saying, the shapeshifter of like what identity or what, you know, label do I want to play with today? But can we stop trying to make sense of everybody else like we are in their body because we're not. We can make sense of them or make them digestible or label them in a way that makes sense to our level of consciousness. But like, to me, at the same time, that's robbing people of their nuance, of their multi-dimensional layers and trying to just make them like make sense in the 3D on this one piece of paper that I can then understand. Because then again, I feel better versus he's interesting. I could see some narcissism there, but I also, I'm not his wife. I'm not his therapist. I'm not his doctor. I don't fucking know. Like, that's just what I'm seeing. But can I drop deeper and feel into it? And it doesn't have to make sense to anybody else.
Amen. When you're trying to put people in boxes, you're back in the matrix. Like
you're famous in the matrix. That's what you said. Yes.
Dude, yeah. Oh yeah. Congratulations. You're famous in the matrix.
God, that was so good. That's so true.
Yes, you're back in the matrix at 100%. And I feel like we should talk about shapeshifting a little bit. I feel like that's really important. And it obviously can never be fully broken down on like a podcast, but this has felt well, okay. I think there are people who innately are wired in a way where this actually comes easier to them. Like you and I both have 12th house stelliums, and that that I know is something that makes it very easy for me to just be like, oh, I'm not that anymore. Now I'm this, and like not really care.
Yep.
But the way I'll teach this, and this is like a very vague overview, because obviously this could be really,
I know. I feel like this could be like a whole podcast episode in itself. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's basically, and I'll keep it pretty like vague to make it like more simplified.
Leave people wanting more. Give them just the tip. Just the tip. That's all they get.
When you are, however you get there, however you do this, when you're in touch with the truth of who you are and what this is beyond knowing, so beyond who you are as a human, beyond the universal play of these are my past lives, this is my star family, these are my guides, like, because that's still the play. When you're in touch, and the way this used to be done was through the mysteries and through mystery schools and through ancient teachings, but there's so many pathways to access it now. But when it's not something you know, because it's not a mind thing, but when you get that in a way, when you've had that experience, or when you've taken a pathway that has allowed you to touch into that, and you can then come back into the play, both as the player, but then as the thing watching the player, you're able to unlock what I just would word as the ability to shapeshift. And it's not, you have to relate to this in a mature way. And I think that I think we get this when we're ready, because it can blow you out. Like you can get blown out by stuff. Because I've seen people relate to this in very immature ways where they get blown out, and then it's like, you're not grounded anymore. Like you've lost touch with the I, because you got so blown out by the I am.
Right. Damn.
You can come back, and this is how I always describe it. You can come back and see the costumes and put them on and be like, okay, this is what I'm up to right now. I'm in this costume and I'm in this identity, and my work is being fully in this. But you're not ever fully in it, because there is always a part of you that knows you're in a costume. And when you're not attached to the costume or to the role or to the like stage you're on, then you can be a shapeshifter. Because then, let's say tomorrow you wake up and your higher levels are like, hey, that's not your costume anymore. You don't care. You're like, cool, what's next? Because you had not attached any aspect of yourself to needing to be in that costume. And this is why I always say, like, I don't personally experience, oh God, what is it called? What is it? Identity something? When people,
imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. Because like for me, I get, okay, now I'm this. Now I'm in this costume, because this costume plays a very specific role in my mission at this time.
Yeah.
And what's so cool about right now, about what's been happening, is a bunch of people's costumes were just set on fire. Like people just lost their costume.
Right.
And we saw everyone running around. What do I grab onto? Toilet paper. Like it's
Sweet baby Jesus. Yeah.
But
toilet paper, Jesus in this specific, like dogmatic fundamentalist way. Yeah.
And it's this cannot be taught. This is not this is not a concept. This is like an experience and a level of consciousness and an embodiment that you become available for. But that has been, like, for me, just so, like, if I didn't operate this way, I would be getting lost in the play constantly. I would constantly be getting lost in the play.
There are so many people lost in the play right now.
Yeah. And it truly is, if I were to put it in its most simple form, when you have that connection and that awareness and just embodiment of God through self, not Sky Daddy who's going to come save me.
Sky Daddy?
Like and then also it's not just Father God, and it's not just Goddess, not just God as a woman, but the Father, Mother, God that allows for like the birthing of spirit through you, or of God through you, source through you, whatever you want to call it. Like this is the Bible before the Bible, like what ascension actually is.
And if you haven't listened to that episode yet, the 12th house stellium sermon, go back and listen to that one we did. Okay.
Yeah, because what ascension actually is on a very simple level is just coming more and more into the God self. It's more and more into God through you as you. It's not, I'm not human anymore, I'm God. And it's also not, I'm nothing, God is everything. This is like, of course, again, we're talking about something that is not, it's so beyond conceptual, but when you start to have those experiences, like unification, however you want to call it, however it's coming through you, it rips you out of the play. Like you have to die in the play so that you can wake up and see where you were asleep.
Preach.
And then it becomes, and it's funny saying this right now with like the times we're in, but then it becomes fun. Then you can have fun.
Yep.
And this is why I always say like the masters who incarnated were like children. They were like children playing on the earth. And that's when you can like be like, okay, I'm putting on this costume now. What is it going to teach me? What is it going to show me? Like, what is this exchange here to show me? And like, what's the next mission? And it's not this like, you're not carrying the weight of needing to be something in the play so heavily on your shoulders anymore, or needing to figure out who you are in the play.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so beautifully said. Sky Daddy. That has me literally rolling.
Because it's like, he's gonna save us, you know?
Right. Which is what a lot of people are doing right now. And again, it's an illusion of safety. It's not actual safety. It's like we're clinging to it from a trauma response. And, you know, and I love what you said too, like the costumes. Like I even think of like Jesus in the Bible, for example, you know, and like the Holy Trinity of like, there's the spirit side, there's the human side. I mean, there were times where he was an activist and he was fucking flipping tables in the temple, blowing shit up. But there's also times where he was completely silent off in the mountains in deep, deep connection. It's not like, oh, I'm an activist, therefore I have to be, you know, guns ablazing, flipping tables every single day. Like you're going to burn yourself out. Like it really is, again, coming into your own knowingness, your own information of what role am I meant to play today? In this, like right now, and knowing that might change day to day. And some people, again, their level of consciousness might see that as you're wishy-washy. I can't figure you out. I can't predict you. And that feels unsafe to them. That triggers them. This happens with me a lot. People will have that experience of me where I'm like, but it would be me out of integrity to not be playing different roles every single day. That would be me trying to, again, make myself digestible and make sense to you to make you comfortable, which isn't actually who I am.
Yep. It's how he moved how spirit moved him. Like, and that's not to say that there aren't going to be times where you're placed in a costume for a long period of time. And because you have a lot to learn and do within that costume. But yes, the Bible has all the ascension codes. There's just so much distortion. You have to like go through them. But the trinitized being, the Mother, Father, God unification that opens up the consciousness to the Son of God and becoming a son. Like this is why like the Bible's so lit, because it actually, even though it became so distorted, it talks about everything that's going on right now if you can decode it. If you can decode it. That's why you have to kind of go into the Bible before the Bible if you like really want to get it. But he and Yeshua ben Joseph had all the teachings and explained them perfectly, explained this whole process with such grace and eloquence, and it was hijacked. Like any other thing that carries immense, like unadulterated purity and truth.
100%. Well, and that, I mean, you have to look at, I mean, it's so obvious, like how much like Revelations is playing out right now, but it has a lot of people in the hijacked version of Revelations, in the man-made version of Revelations. Oh, the world is ending. This is the apocalypse. Jesus is going to come save us and we can like just chill, versus like, interesting, things are crumbling. New earth is being created. What, like, there's just so much, again, there's so much nuance. There's so much, kind of up for interpretation. What is like the truth here versus what is the distortion here? There's a lot of people that will try to tell you what it is and like get you on their side versus like, this is my information, this is your like, there's just, oh my God, we could go on a whole.
And it doesn't, to me, here. It's like, if we're scanning that on a very simplified level, as long as what you're believing gives you access to who you are and to a willingness to be here fully, then go for it. Like, by all means. We don't all need to be saying the same things and working through the same templates. It's when the template you're in has you believing that you're not powerful, that fear, suffering, and scarcity are normal and you should be feeling them constantly, that being here isn't a gift and a blessing. Like, when your template is making you afraid to be here, that's when I'm like, okay, this is an issue.
100%. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Damn. There's like about, I don't know, 100 more hours here we could probably go into, but my bladder with a baby sitting on it is also going to explode. And I feel like right. Oh my God. I was like, oh my God, what? And I also love I love leaving people wanting more of like, so let us know, you guys, what you loved about this conversation. Where should we go next time? Of course, we'll tune into our own channels and bring through whatever, as we always do. But if there was something here where you're like, ooh, that's really juicy, that's really potent, I want more of that, let us know over on Instagram at Pilar Lesko, at Olivia Seline. We would love to know. Pilar, where does everyone connect with you from here?
My email list is lit. The best place. I'll give you the link. I'm on there once or twice a month. Who knows when I'll be back on Instagram. I mean, my Instagram's still there. I don't know, but I do everything at this point through my email list.
I love it. I love that so much. And yeah, you can go to her Instagram. You'll feel her. I'm telling you, you'll feel her. I always, connect with me through the roots, like energetically, we're all connected and we're able to like tap in. But am I visible on Instagram? I don't know. And that's kind of fun. It's kind of part of the mystery of feeling that energy and feeling that embodiment beyond, did I get my 5 posts of the day and did the algorithm screw me over? Like, okay, again, ascending out of that different level of consciousness, you do you, boo, but like, I don't have time for that. Nobody has. Anyway, that could be a whole nother conversation. So Pilar, thank you for being here as always, for bringing your wisdom, your goodness, your purity. I have so many notes. Again, there's so many more places I could like take this and want to go with you on this. Is there any final words wanting to come through on anything that we touched on today that would feel like it would wrap things up for you?
The one thing that's coming through that has felt really big the last 9 months is that an aspect of liberation that feels really important is letting yourself be where you are versus where you wish you were. And I know, like, I personally, people will get in my field and there will be this feeling of like, oh, I need to be where you are, or I'm not like keeping up, or whatever could happen when you get in someone's field that could like provoke things. And the quickest pathway to the liberation and to the freedom is just being completely okay with where you are right now and acknowledging that. And I know, like, I've said a lot of things where I'm like, I'm in my peace. That doesn't mean I haven't spent lifetimes and years and many, many moments since this all started being in complete approval of where I am moment to moment.
Oh my God, I love that so much. Because if you try to logically, mentally, rationally make sense of where you are, you're hooked back into the matrix.
Yeah.
And you're
like,
famous.
I just spent
then you're famous in the Matrix. Good for you.
Yeah. I literally just spent 3 days drinking apple cider, eating snacks, and watching reality TV. Because I was like, I'm clearing. My human needs to chill. This is where I am. And it was one of those moments where I was like, I wish everyone who follows me could see this. Because, like, I'm humaning super hard because it's what I need.
I love that. So I'm obsessed with you on in so many different ways, but especially for that last piece.
Housewives.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Housewives, apple cider, eating leftover Halloween candy. I'm so freaking here for it. And that's the thing too. Like me lately, it's been like, I do enjoy politics. So I'm into politics, but I'm not hooked into it and like spinning out in it. I can witness it. I can view it very much like reality TV. I'm not hooked into it and it's like my life and my identity. It's like I can watch.
You're watching.
I can hold myself. Yeah. And then I can come out of it and I'm not like drowning in it. So I'm with you. The human, honoring the hell out of it, which means we have to relieve our bladders at this point. So thank you everyone for being here. We love you. And we can't wait to have another one of these conversations soon. Thank you, Pilar, so much. And I'm sure we'll talk more soon.